The horizon line is shared in 1 and 2 point perspective, but in 2 point perspective, you place 2 spots, unlike the 1 point perspective, as the name implies. With 2 spots, the only rule you have to concern yourself with is that any vertical lines are perpendicular to the horizon. Okay, 90 degrees to that. So if I take a ruler and establish a line, this line that I'm putting on can happen anywhere in this picture, but what I'm going to do is put it in the center for now. If I make it too tall, my structure gets too big, so I'm deliberately going to cut it down later, but just showing you that this line here is perpendicular to the horizon. And I'll erase any confusing lines that are already starting to show up. So, from this line, I'm going to determine a spot that feels good to me, or right at the moment. There's no logic to it yet. But every line that comes off of that spot will go to one of the 2 vanishing points. So if I have lines going in this direction, I will bring them back to that vanishing point. If they're shared at the top, I might do the same just now to get this established. But if I want to give this structure some form, I might choose a spot, and again it's arbitrary, here. All I have to do if I'm going to draw a line there is make sure that it's perpendicular to the horizon. And in doing so, it would be parallel to its mate, the first line I drew. To vary things, I'm going to change up the width. And in previous examples, I used the piece of paper to gauge the distance, so I hope that everything's staying on track. But deliberately here, I might want to take that distance and elongate it, make it a little bit longer than the previous one. So I'll take this point and put another line parallel to this one, but more importantly, perpendicular to the horizon. To see a lot of lines going through this structure can get confusing. So dotted lines are what I'm going to rely on now. But if you had colored pencils and you wanted to use them, that would be fine also. And to make it not as cluttered as it could be, I'm not going to continue the lines all the way down. I hope that you'll be able to follow some of the marks that I've left. And from this vanishing point on the left-hand side, which I'll call VP1, and to this one on the other side, I'll just call it VP2 for vanishing point. I'm going to go from vanishing point 1 to the corner right here and do the same as I did previously with that other dotted line and create another dotted line to follow, because I know as this drawing progresses, I'm not going to really care about these lines and there's no sense establishing them any darker. The top of this particular line would slope towards that vanishing point. So I'm going to put it in likewise and only put in as much as I need to illustrate the point I'm getting at. From this vanishing point, this corner here would be drawn, and I'll take same dotted line and continue. So we could theoretically be seeing the inside of a building if I wanted to complete these lines and look at that same room that we did in the previous example from a different angle. But I'm going to choose this spot. I'll connect these dots so that you see the connecting point or the intersecting point of these lines. And I'll do the same at the top, just in that corner, to get an idea where those lines intersect. And if I've done it correctly, this should connect with that one at an angle that's perpendicular to the horizon, or close enough. Again, none of this will be seen beyond the example I'm using next. If I took this corner of this square or rectangle that I've drawn and connected a line to it with a diagonal, and this is just against this front plane of this building or structure, and did the same from the other corners. So connecting this corner to this one and this through this with a diagonal gives me the center point of this square in perspective. If I want to take a line and measure it, I'll just grab a scrap piece of paper and take this to here and this translate that way. It's a lot easier for me than sitting with a ruler and looking at increments of inches or centimeters or millimeters or whatever it might be. I can then draw a line straight up through those points and leave it for now, and do the same as I did just previously with that front panel or plane by putting a diagonal line through the corners of these two corners. That gives me the same thing as I did here, but I'll take another piece of paper, mark those spots, and move it around that way. Connecting those dots, I can take a line straight up from that. At any point in this drawing, I have to involve myself in some decision making. Here, the first thing I'm going to do is clean off a lot of these unnecessary lines. Where the dotted lines were, I don't have to make as much of an effort because there's fewer lines to erase. It's not a continuous line. But in some of those other areas, I want to leave them in for future reference if I need them. I can always clean them up later, but I'm really going to knock them down with a little bit more pressure than I need to. And I don't need to see those lines very clearly. So I'm going to knock all this down and keep that framework sort of visible, but it's not going to be that necessary. Okay, I can even clean off a line like this that might have been a distraction. What I want you to see now is that I've taken this front or solid line here and this line and strengthened it a bit. I am going to keep these lines, but I want you through the camera to be able to see a little bit clearer what I've drawn here. So when I refer to the plane, this surface here and this surface here are the two planes I'm talking about. Imagine us having a building out of this shape, but we want to put a peak on a roof, for example. I have to at some point make a decision